On the back of the letter was a hand-drawn map showing the way to Oak Lake. At first, I wondered why anyone in this day and age would still use a map. But when I tried to locate the place on Google Maps, nothing appeared. I should have dismissed it as a prank and moved on. Instead, I took a photo of the letter and shared it in our group chat with my friends, most of whom aren't as into spooky stuff as I am, and asked if anyone wanted to follow the lead. After some back and forth, we decided to take the trip. Worst case scenario? If the place turned out to be nothing, we'd instead enjoy a week-long vacation in the nearest town. So we set off, me, Jake, my best friend since childhood, his girlfriend Emma, Matt, a school friend, and Matt's twin brother Alex. I think Jake and I were the only ones in the group who truly hoped the village existed. After several hours on the highway and crossing into Pennsylvania, we reached the first fork that wasn't marked on any maps but clearly existed, despite being an unpaved country road. Emma protested, but curiosity got the better of us guys, and with Matt driving, we continued our journey. About half an hour later, on the unmarked roads, we arrived at our destination. In the distance, we saw the author of the letter, a very old man with a long white beard and a bald head. Despite the cool weather, he wore thin, outdated clothing. He introduced himself as John Miller and led us to the village. The village looked old, but was impeccably maintained. There were only about 50 houses, and most of the residents we saw were as elderly as John, yet very friendly. After a brief tour, John showed us the house where we would be staying. It was spotless and stocked with food, as there were no stores in the village and supplies supposedly only arrived on Sunday mornings for all residents. Since it was already quite late, we spent the rest of that Sunday preparing some food and inspecting the house from the inside. It wasn't surprising that the interior also seemed straight out of the early 20th century. There was no TV or internet, but a very retro-looking refrigerator was filled with plenty of meat. For some reason, we just assumed that the residents were extremely nostalgic, and that the aging population was the result of younger people moving away due to the village's isolated location. Obviously, this was a gross underestimation of reality, but the true truth surpassed anything anyone could have imagined. The next morning, John knocked on our door promptly at sunrise. None of us were still awake, and he didn't seem willing to stop knocking until someone answered. Reluctantly, I dragged myself half asleep to the door to ask what he wanted. He insisted that everyone in the village must gather at the village square within 400 seconds after sunrise. When I pointed out that my friends weren't even awake yet, he remained persistent and warned that we would have to leave immediately if we didn't make it on time, and that he would charge us for the overnight stay. He even mentioned that we could come in our pajamas if needed. Reluctantly, I woke up my friends, and we hurried in our sleepwear and jackets to the square, determined to comply, if only to learn more about the lake monster. When we arrived, the villagers were just beginning to count down the last 20 seconds together. As they reached 0, John closed the small gate that marked the only entrance to the fenced area where we stood. Then, a list of all the residents was read aloud, and each person raised their hand in response to confirm their presence. We couldn't help but laugh a little, as it strangely reminded us of roll calls at school. After they finished, they also read our names. We raised our hands, and then everyone was allowed to leave. On the way back, Emma scolded me, accusing me of having shared our full names and probably even our addresses and phone numbers. However, I started to feel uneasy because although John could have known my name from my website, I hadn't shared my friends' names anywhere. I decided to address it with him at the first opportunity. That opportunity came quickly, as about 15 minutes later, John returned to our house. He wanted to show us the lake and encouraged us to swim in it since it was a thermal spring and pleasantly warm despite the season. When I asked how he knew my friends' names, he simply replied that we had told him the night before and must have forgotten. In hindsight, I'm pretty sure that was a lie, but at the time it seemed plausible enough. So, we put on our swimsuits and followed John to the lake, which was only about 100 meters away. It was surrounded by stone walls, allowing access from only a single entry point. Admittedly, swimming in a lake rumored to house a monster wasn't the brightest idea, but most of us didn't believe in monsters anyway. Jake and I, eager to find traces of the creature, had brought snorkels and goggles that I had packed specifically for this purpose. However, the water was so murky that we couldn't see the bottom even with the snorkels, despite the lake being shallow. Disappointed, we gave up our search after an hour and joined the others for a small water game before heading back to the house for a late lunch. The rest of the day was spent complaining about the lack of internet and passing time with board games. The next 2 days were similar. We participated in the strange attendance checks, searched for clues about the lake monster, swam, and entertained ourselves with board games. We had little contact with the villagers, most of whom only spoke German, which was, of course, natural in a German-speaking community. However, on Thursday, the situation took a drastic turn. One of the villagers, a man named Henry Parker, arrived late to the morning attendance check and stumbled on his way to the gate, missing the deadline by just a meter as John closed it. Henry broke down in tears and went to the lake. His absence from the attendance check was met with nothing more than a sad, "unfortunate." The rest of the day went on as usual for us until Jake found Henry's coat on the shore of the lake in the afternoon. Without telling the others, we took the coat to John's house. To our surprise, he opened the door before we could even knock. Laughing, he said he had missed his coat. When we pointed out that it seemed to belong to Henry Parker, John denied the man's existence and claimed that no one by that name lived in the village. Unwilling to be gaslighted, we refused to return the coat unless he showed us the attendance list. Reluctantly, he agreed, and indeed Henry Parker was not listed. Although unsettled, we decided to drop the matter, left the coat with John, and returned to the lake. There, we asked the others if they remembered the man who had stumbled during the attendance check. Strangely, everyone denied having seen anyone fall. That day, during our diving attempts, I discovered a small cave entrance underwater. However, it was too late in the day to explore it, so I decided to do so the next day. On Friday, Alex, who had caught a sore throat the day before, joined us for the attendance check but decided to stay in bed afterward. He said he felt too unwell to swim or play and preferred to sleep instead. During our search at the lake that day, I came across a muddy imprint on the shore. A large, fin-like mark far too big to belong to any fish that could live in such a small lake. Excited, I called Jake over and took a few photos. We were both ecstatic, much more than we should have been, given the circumstances. We called Emma and Matt over to show them the findings, but their reactions were much less enthusiastic. Emma was particularly concerned and feared that the mark might belong to something dangerous, like a shark. As we debated the origin, Alex suddenly appeared, angry and cursing John. He called him a crazy, senile old man and ranted about those crazy cultists. As it turned out, John and 2 other villagers had broken into our house while Alex was alone, doused him with a bucket of water, and declared him 5 times blessed. Then, without another word, they left the house. That was the last straw. We decided it was time to pack up and leave immediately. At that moment, a now familiar voice with a German accent called out to us, "My friends, you can't leave without seeing the monster." Alex stormed towards him, ready to strike, but was stopped when John pulled out an old firearm from his coat and shot at Alex. Alex let out a piercing scream as his right hand was evidently badly injured. "It's done," the old man exclaimed just as the lake water mixed with Alex's blood. We rushed to our friend, but suddenly, a serpentine creature about 65 feet long with fins directly behind its head emerged from the water, drawn by the blood. We froze in shock, unable to process the chaos that had unfolded in the last few seconds. We were trapped with the monster while John blocked the exit, now reinforced by more men. The joy on his face didn't reveal that he saw the situation as particularly dangerous for himself. As I pondered whether climbing over the roughly 16-foot-high stone wall was a viable escape route, the creature lunged at the sitting, stunned Alex, and devoured him in a single bite. "I feel some pity for such young people," John said almost mockingly. "But anyone foolish enough to come here voluntarily as our sacrifice shouldn't complain. I hope our eternal life, God, is exciting enough for the rest of your days." Matt was the first to react, running towards the beast. I assume he was either trying to avenge his brother or save him somehow. Either way, his attempt ended with the creature's tail fin slamming him against the wall, causing him to join Alex shortly after. At that moment, I remembered the cave. It wasn't far from our position and narrow enough for us to pass through, but likely too small for the monster. The questions I couldn't answer were whether the cave was only partially underwater and if it even had an exit, or if we would have to starve inside. Nevertheless, it seemed a better chance of escape than confronting an alleged god and several armed men without weapons. I shouted for everyone to follow me and jumped into the water. Whether Jake and Emma followed was honestly not my main concern at that moment. I was focused on saving my own life. However, I'm pretty sure that at least Jake followed me, as I saw him behind me when I reached the cave entrance. What I do know for certain is that he never entered the cave with me. I assume he went back to save Emma. He seemed like that kind of guy, a brave but foolish decision. The water burned my eyes, and I was gasping for air as I finally surfaced inside the cave. Although I had clawed my way through the tight tunnel walls and the creature likely knew where I was, I felt relatively safe for the time being. Fortunately, the cave had dry ground to stand on and some visibility, as sunlight filtered through small cracks. I lay there for at least a minute, panting for air and mentally exhausted. Then I finally stood up to look for an exit. The first thing I saw was drawings on the walls clearly depicting the monster, along with what looked like a story about human sacrifices. Either the drawings provided no further details, or I was simply not in the mental state to interpret them further. Among the images was something written in English with blood. Since I didn't speak the language perfectly, I didn't retain much of it. The few words I remembered seemed to mean something like strangers, sacrifice, century, more, and immortality. I would have loved to photograph everything, but unfortunately, my phone had broken during the escape through the underwater tunnel. After taking a quick glance around, I stumbled forward and finally saw a corridor that seemed to lead outside. Just as I approached the exit, I heard someone else entering the cave through the water tunnel. For a moment, I hoped it could be Jake or Emma who had made it, but that hope was shattered by a string of English curses echoing through the cave. I hurried out as fast as I could and heard a desperate, loud "no," just as my foot stepped into freedom. At the same time, I felt a stabbing pain in my left leg. I looked down and saw an old, completely rusted machete that someone had obviously thrown into my leg stuck in it. When I turned around, my attacker was nowhere to be seen. At that moment, I had already resigned myself to dying here in the middle of Nowheresville. I could barely walk, was miles away from any civilization, and couldn't return to my car because it was parked in that cursed village full of crazies. Limping a few meters from the cave entrance, I noticed that I had come out on the side of the rocky wall enclosing the lake. What I saw next, however, wasn't a horde of armed villagers charging at me, but Oak Lake itself, completely in ruins, as if the town had been abandoned for ages. Everything was covered with leaves and mud, and my car was barely visible beneath them. Completely confused, I made my way to the house where we had stayed the past week, my last hope. After digging through the mud for a while, I finally found Alex's phone, which he had left behind in his rage. The phone had little battery left, as it hadn't been charged in 6 days, but fortunately, it had also been barely used. Although there was no signal in this deserted area, I managed to drag myself about a mile closer to civilization, where I could finally call for help. At some point, I must have collapsed because I woke up in a hospital. For a brief moment, I hoped it was all just a nightmare. But that hope was definitively crushed when police officers arrived to question me about why I had been found near Oak Lake with a rusty machete stuck in my leg. I told them everything that had happened, though I understand why the authorities believed I was just a tourist who had gone on a wild adventure trip with friends. At least, they didn't think I had killed them. Their theory was that all 4 of my friends had probably died somewhere near the lake from dehydration while under the influence, as their bodies were never found. However, the police found my car in an area described by one of them as a long-abandoned village dating back to early American settlement times and buried under a leaf storm. They also discovered the rest of the machete embedded in my leg, along with many other artifacts of similar age. One thing the authorities couldn't explain was why the house where we had stayed contained a destroyed refrigerator that was over 100 years old and still held perfectly edible meat. Once upon a time, there was a completely ordinary young man living in the remote areas of the Appalachian Mountains in Boone County, West Virginia. Nothing exciting happened in my hometown. It was mostly dense forests and swampy areas, and every now and then, a wild animal would roam by. The only tragedies people heard about were someone being attacked by a wild boar or an accident occurring. Occasionally, someone would go missing, but it was usually dismissed as another hiker getting lost in the woods. You know, it's well known in the southern United States that you shouldn't wander alone into the swamps and forests at night. Everyone who grew up here knows that. Most say it's because of the wild animals, or that there are caves and old wells you could fall into. If you fell in, no one would find you for days. But there was one story that was told to the local children and passers-by. In the darkest part of the forest, where the road ends and everything is deadly quiet, there lies a small village of people. These people practiced a form of religion that some would call a cult. It's said they conducted animal sacrifices, and at night you could hear strange howls and wails coming from the hills. They called this place Hollow Creek. Every time someone tried to film or take photos of this place, the believers would react violently. They would throw stones at cars and chase people with weapons. Once, a friend of mine simply turned around on that road, and they shot at him with a shotgun. His car doors were riddled with bullet holes. It's a place full of fear and secrets, and to be honest, I have no idea why I did what I did. I wish I hadn't, and maybe I would still be in danger. It was a typical Saturday. I had the day off from my job at the local gas station and was bored out of my mind. My usual distractions, like watching TV or playing video games, weren't providing the usual satisfaction. So I decided to call a few friends and do something. Everyone came over. There were 4 guys in total. We sat in the living room and talked for a few minutes about what we could do to kill time. One of my closest friends, named Mike, had an idea. He decided to take revenge on the people in Hollow Creek because they had damaged his truck. We listened as he planned to go to the main building where their worship was said to take place and disrupt the place. He said he didn't actually want to destroy anything, just cause a bit of a commotion and annoy them. We all decided to muster up the courage and do it. An hour later, we set off. It was supposed to be dark, so we wouldn't be seen as we entered the building. We also decided to park our trucks on the highway and just walk through the forest. That was our first mistake. As I mentioned, no one goes into the woods at night, although we thought it was a good idea since we were a team and weren't really alone. We drove to Hollow Creek, all dressed in black. We wanted everything to go smoothly and not get caught. We acted tough, but as we parked the trucks and started walking towards the forest, no one said a word. We all stood at the edge of the trees, which felt like hours. As I stared into the darkness, a strange, ominous feeling washed over me, and I knew I should have left, but I didn't. We all began to walk. At that point, I regret everything. The forest itself was silent and still. Not even the crickets were making sounds. That deeply unsettled me. We continued straight ahead, knowing our way through the woods like any local kid would. We didn't talk anymore, seeing no reason to. We just kept going. Then, when we were about halfway to Hollow Creek, we heard a sound. It wasn't a normal natural sound, but an eerie noise. A loud creaking, like someone opening an old barn door, but much louder. We all crawled to the ground like soldiers under attack. That was unsettling. I looked at my friends and saw the same fear in their eyes that I felt myself. That was not normal, and I didn't want to be there anymore. We lay there for a few minutes after the sound had died down, waiting to see if it would come back. I didn't want to leave that place. I wanted to be home and just bored. I should never have continued, but I did. Why did I keep going? We agreed that it was only the people from Hollow Creek trying to scare us away and that we shouldn't be intimidated. We had the resolve of our youth on our side. We stood up and kept moving. We reached the walls of the village itself. The walls were made of stone and painted dark green with white markings. The cult members called the markings sigils, saying each one represented a different spirit of the forest. I examined them closely, and they all seemed so strange to me. I must have stared at them for a while because one of my friends had to snap me out of my daze. We decided that we would help each other over the wall, one by one, and the last person would have to climb a nearby tree to get over. I decided I would be the one to climb the tree. We all managed to get over pretty quickly, each hiding on the other side of the wall as soon as they touched the ground. I was the last, as agreed, and almost broke my leg when I landed from a greater height in the tree than those who had climbed over the wall. We were then inside. All previous fears had vanished as we saw that no lights were on and everything seemed quiet. At that moment, we knew Mike would get his revenge. We made our way to the center of the village. Along the way, we noticed strange artworks in the small cabins leading to the main house. Each was decorated with occult symbols and sigils. Small statues covered with red and black beads. Feathers adorned the doors of the cabins. This was a strange and frightening place. No one in their right mind would want to live here. But people did live here. It was a horrifying thought to know that the crazed individuals would try to kill us at any moment if they caught us. We found our way through the winding paths leading to the large building in the center. We hid every time someone thought they saw something. Mostly, we just ran away in front of shadows or strange noises. In the end, we all stood in front of large oak doors that were darkly stained. We had made it. Mike was the first to try the door. We didn't expect it to actually open, assuming they would lock everything up, as paranoid as they were. But to our surprise, it swung open with a push. The building itself looked like an old church that had been painted black. It loomed high and had the same symbols as the cabins, but these symbols were painted with more care and craftsmanship than those on the walls and cabins of the rest of the village. It had a feeling of darkness, like the feeling after watching a horror movie or when you're alone at home and hear a noise that isn't there. The door was now open, and we stared inside. Candles lit the path of the old church. Everything was painted black and red. The only thing that was white looked like a stone table standing on an altar. That was beyond bizarre. We walked down the path, taking in everything that was visible in the dim light. I walked to the pedestal on the altar. It was made of twisting black iron rods, and the surface was covered with red and black beads. This place scared me. It sent chills down my spine, and I didn't want to stay there any longer. I turned to my friends and told them I wanted to leave. They all looked to Mike, who was standing next to one of the pews. He looked at me and smiled. Mike began knocking over all the pews one by one, and as if what I had said hadn't happened, my friends joined in too. They started tipping over the pews and throwing books around. It was as if they were in a frenzy. In their madness, they even knocked over the white altar. I watched and did nothing, neither helping nor hindering. It had gone too far, I knew. The moment the altar hit the ground, it tore. For some reason, my friends and I stopped what we were doing and stared at the altar. It made a sound. It was the same loud screeching, a long, rusty squeak, as if something was in pain. As the noise faded, we looked at each other. Then we felt a coldness fill the room. It crept into our souls. I didn't know what to do. I was frozen with fear. The room went dark, and an eerie feeling of dread filled me. One by one, the candles went out. As all the light left the room, only the uneasy breathing of my friends remained. Then we heard a sound, a godless, otherworldly sound. It was a growl, a deep, hellish growl coming from behind me. I was frozen to the ground and couldn't move. I stared at the broken altar. My friends did the same. It was there, in the darkness, with eyes red and flaming. We didn't know what else it was made of. It was low to the ground and smelled of death. It was a rotting, putrid stench. Then it made that sound, that rusty squeak. It was so loud I had to cover my ears. We were going to die. I felt it. I don't know what inspired me to move, but I did. I knew I had to get up and get as far away from this monster as possible. And as if it could read my thoughts, it laughed. Oh God, it laughed at me. A deep chuckle. I turned to my friends and screamed at them to run to the door immediately. They didn't hesitate. We all ran to the door at the same time. I didn't even act polite and kicked the door open, breaking it off its hinges. Then we saw a scene almost as terrifying as the beast inside. The entire village stood at the door. They were dressed in white, some covered in red. Their faces were painted to resemble the dead. I was scared for my life. They didn't move from their spots. They began singing a song that sounded like an old American folk song. The words repeated over and over. The devil sits at the gate, and he'll grow hungry when it's late, so be still, baby, don't cry. It's just your fate. Tonight you'll be his dinner and his companion. I screamed in fear and foolish bravery. I charged at the people in front of me, and my friends followed suit. We assumed we would fight and were prepared for it, but they moved out of the way. How or why, I don't know. They just moved and kept staring and singing. As we ran back to the wall, I stopped and looked behind me, and there it was, that devilish, red-eyed demon, still cloaked in the darkness of the church. I ran harder than ever before. We ran straight to the wall, and as if by the only bit of luck in the night, there was a tree we could climb to get over the wall. We climbed as fast as we ever had in our lives. We all climbed at the same time and stepped over each other. We knew if we could get over the wall, we would be free until we reached the trucks. We all jumped over at the same time. We made it. We defeated that godless monster and those hellish followers. But as we stood for a moment to catch our breath, there it was. That godless beast stood right in front of us, and I saw it, In all its terrible monstrosity, it was hellish. It had horns protruding from its head. It stood like an animal on all fours, but had the head of a horse skull with peeling skin on it. Its eyes were dead in their sockets, pure white and rotting. It had long, sharp teeth. Its body was like that of a bull, but it looked as if it had been whipped until the flesh fell from its bones. I closed my eyes, knowing it was coming. I heard the most godless screams as I was certain it was devouring my friend's whole. I lost consciousness from panic. I woke up the next day next to my truck, which was parked on the highway. I was covered in blood, and none of my friends were with me. I knew they were dead. I don't know why I survived. I thought it was a warning to others who sought Hollow Creek. I drove home, not knowing what to do. I tell you this as a testament to what happened. I want it to be known that I intend to return after delving into the occult and gaining enough knowledge to take revenge for my friends. I will drive this monster back to the hell it came from. Let me provide you with some background information first. At that time, I worked as a mobile vacuum cleaner technician. If your vacuum had a problem, I was the person who would show up at your home, fix the issue, and then disappear. This meant I often worked 9 to 12-hour days, traveling through the northern parts of the United States, especially through the picturesque regions of the Appalachian Mountains and the Ozark Plateau. I never really had many strange encounters. Sometimes a house felt a little off, or the people themselves were somewhat quirky, but nothing that truly stood out. At least, not compared to the stories I've read here, thank God. This particular case involves a vanished village. I call it a vanished village because that's exactly what it is. It simply disappeared, no longer there, and it's right here that I hope some of you can help me with. It was a fairly beautiful day in January, and I was heading into the Appalachian Mountains, where most of my day's appointments were located. To make our work easier, the central office had us stationed in one place for the day, so we drove there, completed our tasks, and then headed home. Great. I had completed a few jobs in the morning, and my next appointment wasn't until around 3 p.m. Punctuality was important. Sometimes customers wouldn't be home until their chosen time, so there was no point in arriving early. I used my smartphone as a navigation device while driving to and from job sites, always planning the next location to see how far I would need to drive after finishing the current job. The next appointment wasn't far from my current location, but since it was almost noon, I decided to take a leisurely drive, find a place for lunch, sit in the van for about an hour, and then head to the job. So I began to drive. I followed the navigation, which wasn't doing much anyway. Most of the time I was on a main road in the Appalachians that led in one direction or another, so I wouldn't get lost too easily. It was a beautiful winter day with a blanket of snow covering the countryside. Where I lived, there was no snow, so this was a really nice change, and I stopped once or twice by the roadside while driving up and down the mountains to take a few photos. This will become somewhat important later. By this point, I was getting hungrier and really needed a place to stop and eat. Since this was rural Appalachia, unless you're in one of the few small towns there, you wouldn't find a restaurant or even a large supermarket on every corner. I kept driving, and around 12:30 p.m., I went over a hill and came into a very small town named Pine Grove. The only road led in from one side and straight out the other. A few houses lined both sides of the street, and a little further to the left, I spotted a small grocery store, so I decided to pull over and see what was available here. At least I could ask a local where my best option would be. The town was very quiet. There were picturesque old houses and a few local, family-run businesses, as far as I could tell. No cars parked by the roadside, and definitely no work being done in the town for decades. That, and not a soul in sight. Luckily, the store was open, so I went inside. The store was a mix between a newspaper stand and a grocery store. Just what you'd expect if you've ever been to a remote town in America. Inside stood the old store owner, Mr. Johnson, behind the counter, and another customer, whom I assumed was a local. To my surprise, there were fresh pies and pastries. Mr. Johnson was friendly enough. I bought myself a pie and a pastry for lunch. I asked him a few questions just to make small talk, and then tried to find out how far it would be to my next location. It turned out my next appointment was in the same town, and he knew the elderly lady, Mrs. Thompson, for whom I was supposed to work. He even offered to call her to see if she was available earlier, but I declined the offer in favor of a 1-hour lunch break in my van. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that the other man in the store was watching me. He definitely exuded a creepy vibe. Think of someone with a hole in the back of their head burning. So, I enjoyed my lunch and then headed to the job. There was a very tight turn off the main road that opened into a small courtyard of houses. I parked the van aside in a corner, packed my things, and went to the house. Surely, I was greeted by the sweet old lady, Mrs. Thompson, who Mr. Johnson had mentioned. She was a delightful old woman, as sweet as they come. She invited me in, showed me her respective vacuum cleaners, and then left me to my work. I'm sure she was happy for the company and to have someone to talk to. At one point, she even brought me tea and cookies. Since I was now inside one of the houses, they weren't anything special. Her house was smaller on the inside than it appeared. Old, faded wallpaper that was slightly peeling. Old dusty carpets that definitely hadn't been maintained. Antique tables and cabinets on the sides of the living room. It felt like a house where your great-great-grandmother would have lived. It was somewhat odd because she had numerous vacuum cleaners, none of which worked. Some were antique and irreparable, so I only worked on the newer ones for which I had spare parts and could actually fix. I offered her a newer replacement vacuum. We always keep at least one newer vacuum in the van, since hers were so old and really unrepairable. But she insisted on keeping the ones she was accustomed to, so I went ahead with the repairs. It was peaceful there, albeit a bit too dusty. She engaged in lovely conversations, told interesting stories while I worked, and was much nicer than some of the other customers, so I was glad to spend my time there. I finished the job, and she tried to offer me an extra payment for my hard work, which I politely declined. I thanked her for the tea, the cookies, and the stories, and made my way out. I only had a few more appointments after hers, so I drove on. And here's where things start to get strange. I know this all might seem very normal, but the thing is, this town doesn't exist. I was there for maybe 2 or 3 hours, sat in my van, ate the food, enjoyed the beautiful scenery, went to the old lady's house, repaired her vacuum cleaners, and then continued with my day. Completed the remaining appointments further away and drove back home. I swear I took the same route back that I came from. When you're on this job a lot, you visit the same places often. The roads become familiar. You drive through the same towns and villages more or less. But on the way home, the town was nowhere to be found. I thought I might have been tired or somehow taken a different road, but I'm sure I took the same route to get home and simply never drove through the town again. That has confused me ever since and keeps coming back to my mind. As mentioned before, you travel a lot on this job. Later in the year, I even went back to the same area, drove the same road, went over the same hilltop, expected to stop at the same spot to get something to eat. And nothing. Just open roads, hills on both sides, the wide, open landscape. Here's where the photos come into play. I love taking photos, even if it's just a quick snapshot with my phone. I've had Apple phones for quite some time and recently got a new one. The miracle of technology, where you can transfer everything from your old phone to the new one in an instant. As I mentioned, I stopped on that drive. Took several photos of the surroundings. I even have a photo of me holding the pie to show how big it was. I sent a funny photo to the family WhatsApp groups with the pie covering my face. I vividly remember taking photos of the small town, the road that runs straight through the town, the storefront so I could remember where I got the food, the strange houses, even a photo of my van in the courtyard. But now, no photos, nothing but landscapes. I checked both phones to see if it was just a glitch, if some things hadn't transferred completely. But no, on both phones, the photos are all the same. I have the photos of the snow-covered hills. I have the photo of the pie in front of my face, but no photo of the street with the houses on both sides, no photo of the storefront, no photos of the small old houses, and no photo of my van. As I went through all this, I also realized that you can see the location of the photos taken. Clever technology again, right? So I checked the location, opened the map, and guess what? No town. I can clearly trace the photo trail on the map, follow it along the road, remember every stop I made to take the pictures. But then nothing. The map shows no town, not even a hint of what might have been there in the past. Just a gap. A space where the photos should have been on the map. A space where the town should have been. I know this will sound strange, and I'm not entirely sure what I'm even seeking help with. Maybe you just think I'm mistaken, and it's in a different place. Maybe you say I'm confusing different occasions in my memory and that similar things have happened to me when I've talked to people about it in person. But this time, I somehow have proof. Or rather, what was once there is now missing. My phone shows that something was there, used to be there, and now it's gone. I know there was a town there. I drove through it. I stopped. I bought food. I went into one of the houses, talked to the people there, but everything just disappeared. I've tried going back there in my free time to find it, but no luck. The town I stopped at has simply vanished, without a trace. I've searched online, but that hasn't yielded anything. Various searches for American towns don't really return many results. I haven't seen anything about vanished towns in America that are similar to my experience, or describe the place where I was. I hope that someone here has had a similar experience, or is a better internet detective than I am. In any case, I'm hopeful. On Saturdays, my grandma Helen would take me, Annie, to watch for fairies. We'd catch the 8:45 a.m. train from Chicago Union Station, navigate through the busy downtown streets, and then spend hours hand in hand exploring the sprawling expanse of the forest preserve. Across the shimmering lake, behind a curtain of hanging ivy, lay a super-secret spot that only we knew about. A flat, grassy clearing, perfect for our midday picnics. While we nibbled on fruit sandwiches and sipped hot tea from Grandma's trusty thermos, she would often point to a nearby oak tree, enormous and sturdy, its trunk cloaked in thick moss. "Look, Annie, that's where the fairies live," she'd say, gesturing to a large hollow at the base of the tree. A ring of thick, spongy mushrooms surrounded the exposed roots, and Grandma insisted that anyone who stepped into the fairy circle risked being trapped in their realm. To 10-year-old Annie, it sounded just like Narnia. All she ever wanted was a glimpse of these magical beings. Her eyes would stay fixed on that dark hole until Grandma began packing up. Then Annie would plead for just 5 more minutes. "Don't worry, Annie, we'll be back next week," Grandma would reassure her, and they'd seal the promise with their little pinky fingers. As a tribute for disturbing their home, Grandma always left a pack of chocolate bars, the fairies' favorite treat, either hidden under a fallen log or nestled among fallen leaves. And every following week, those goodies would mysteriously disappear. No matter what we did together, browsing through thrift stores, playing hopscotch, or even doing homework, Grandma and I always had the best time. So you can imagine how devastating it was to find her lying on the kitchen floor, her eyes rolled back from the depths of her skull. She was rushed to the hospital on June 3rd, 2015. Adults in my life kept promising she would recover soon, but while I stayed with my Aunt Christine, one night I quietly crept down the stairs and overheard her on the phone. Poor Helen has developed sepsis. Even if she miraculously survives, she'll be too weak to take care of Annie. During our next visit, Grandma was hooked up to a ventilator, her arms bruised purple from the countless ugly contusions. I grabbed Aunt Christine's hand and told her we needed to go to Ravenswood Forest immediately. Maybe the fairies would grant a wish in exchange for the chocolate bars, just like in the old stories. With a sympathetic voice, she explained that Grandma needed us nearby now, not wishes. Frustrated, I stormed out of the hospital, doctors and nurses calling after me. I sped past the parking lot, took the next bus from Chicago's Union Station and used my pocket money to buy the largest pack of chocolate bars I could find. Beyond the overpass, a bearded man handed me a flyer, protesting the city council's decision to cut down Ravenswood Forest and develop a housing block. I folded it into my pocket and mumbled, "Thanks." At the fairy tree, I placed the chocolate bars outside the circle and whispered, "I don't know if you're listening, but I really, really need a wish. Please make my Grandma Helen healthy again, please." I sat there with my legs crossed until dusk. By then, there had been no signs of fairies, and worse, Aunt Christine would be absolutely furious with me. Angry at the foolish fairies, I shouted, "Thanks for nothing," and kicked the nearest mushroom cap off. I pushed through the ivy curtain and trudged along the path until suddenly, a flutter of wings sounded from the direction of the tree. I turned around, but saw nothing. Had the fairies heard my wish? I pushed back through the vines, but found no mythical creatures, only a slender girl, about my age, dressed in a strange blouse, stuffing chocolate bars into her mouth faster than a hippo could eat. "Are you a fairy?" I asked, slowly approaching her. Like me, she had curly blonde hair, except hers stuck out in all directions, almost wild. "I'm not a fairy," she snapped, her mouth half full. "Then what are you?" "I'm a girl." I thought for a moment. "Why are your clothes so weird?" "Weird? What's weird about a pink sweater with a unicorn on it?" I said, "You shouldn't eat these cookies, I saved them for the fairies." That was silly. Didn't anyone tell you fairies are just figments of your imagination? They aren't. Neither are you. My hands balled into fists. Anyway, I paid for them, and you're just shoveling them into your mouth. After a loud burp, she said, "Do you have more?" I shook my head, and with that she ducked into the hollow. "You could at least say thank you," I yelled. No response. I stepped over the mushrooms, walked directly to the hollow, and peered inside. The girl was gone. But how? At that moment, I remembered Grandma's warning. Was this how fairies lured children into their realm? If that was true, what did I have to lose? Without a wish, Grandma wouldn't survive much longer. I took a step into the dark space, the ground gave way, and I fell forward. My chin hit a clump of wet earth. I stood up, spitting out moss and dead leaves. I had landed outside the tree. But wait, wasn't I supposed to fall into the tree? How did that work? It seemed hardly important. Above me, storm clouds were gathering, and the sun was nearly set. I didn't want to get lost overnight, so I made my way back to the path. Immediately, there was sensory confusion. Instead of an ivy curtain, there were now gnarly, twisted branches swaying in a strong wind, and the grass was covered in a fresh layer of dew, as if it had just stopped raining. I struggled through the branches, searching for familiar landmarks, turning once, twice, and soon found myself wandering in the dark again. Hoping that a later passerby would rescue me, I repeatedly called out for help. "Hello?" Finally, a male voice responded. "I'm lost, please help me," I shouted, running past a dense cluster of trees toward the sound. But as a heavy pair of boots approached, I stopped abruptly. I don't know why I suddenly got scared. Maybe it was the sour stench that came with the approaching silhouette. Or perhaps the rough, scratchy quality in his voice that I could now clearly hear over the groaning air. Either way, I had a strong feeling he didn't want to see me. Quickly, I left the path and pressed my back against the opposite side of a maple tree. I closed my eyes tightly, my whole body trembling as the voice circled my position. "Where are you, sweetheart? Come out." Then, out of nowhere, something brushed my arm. A hand clamped over my mouth, stifling an emerging scream. Terrified, I opened my eyes to see the girl from before. A finger pressed to her lips. We stood motionless as heavy footsteps passed by, the rough voice fading into the darkness. Once he was completely silent, the girl whispered, "Come on, let's go," and pulled me along the path. For 15 minutes, she led me through a labyrinth of swaying trees and hedges. On the other side of the lake, we approached what resembled the front entrance, except the tracks above the overpass were gone. And after this tunnel supposedly propelled us onto Main Street, my jaw dropped. The train station was gone, replaced by 2 rows of red brick houses. Black posts with arches stood every 20 meters or so as sentinels, and there was no clear boundary between the street and the sidewalk. Was this the fairy's realm? Unfazed, the girl guided me through a narrow passage into a cobblestone path between 2 buildings. Still out of breath, I said, "The overpass." "The what? The railroad tracks?" "Oh, that. It doesn't exist yet." I stared at her in disbelief. "You traveled through time," she said, as if it was no big deal. In response to my astonished expression, she added, "If you climb the tree, you travel through time." "You're lying." Although my conscious mind denied it, my senses acknowledged it as true. How else could the magical transformation of Main Street be explained? "Why is that so hard to believe?" the girl asked angrily. "Didn't you believe in fairies 20 minutes ago?" "That's different," I replied bitterly. "I'm going back." "You can't." "Why?" "Pat the Shepherd is back there. He's probably still looking for you." "Who is Pat the Shepherd?" "A local nut job. They say he's responsible for a series of missing children. That's why he lives alone in a cabin deep in the woods." "Is there no way around it?" I asked, still trying to process these events. The girl shook her head. I thought for a moment. If the tree takes me through time, then... When am I? 1955. 1955? Have the fairies sent me here as punishment for kicking that stupid mushroom? Sure, Grandma wouldn't help me now. I curled into a ball, knees pressed to my chest, and sobbed. "What's wrong?" the girl asked. "I want to go home." "Oh, well, I can take you back to the tree tomorrow." "What am I supposed to do until then? I don't know anyone in 1955, and you ate the fairies' cookies." "Why does that matter?" "Because I really needed a wish. My grandma is sick, and I needed the fairies to make her healthy." As I buried my face in my lap, the girl said, "Why don't you come home with me? You can hide there until morning." In hindsight, she probably offered because of guilt over my unfortunate situation. Aunt Christine would be insanely worried about me, but there seemed to be no other choice. I stood up and wiped slime from my chin. Okay, you owe me for eating the chocolate. Then it settled. By the way, my name is Rosa. Annie. As we walked down the alley, she pointed to my sweater. Okay, Annie, people in 1955 aren't used to such clothing, and otherwise no one knows the tree, so we have to hide. Besides, my grandma would freak out if she thinks there's another mouth to feed, so I'll sneak you in from behind. I live with my grandma, I said. Then, ceremoniously, well, I do. Was she a strict lady who spanked you with a cane? Rosa asked over her shoulder. Number. She's nice. Better than mine, then. Are you hungry? Out of nowhere, my stomach growled. We can stop by the bakery. Mrs. Donnelly works there on Saturdays. If there's anything left before closing, she'll let me take some. Across a network of puddle-filled side streets, I crouched in the shadow of an entrance as Rosa knocked on a wooden door. A smiling woman in a green apron appeared and handed us a loaf of bread. After chatting for a while, the woman went back inside. Then Rosa hurried over and tore the loaf in half. Here. It's not as tasty as chocolate bars, but it's still pretty good. 1955 felt more like a sleepy village than a bustling city. Within minutes, we reached the outskirts. Then, a winding gravel road led us past farm fields filled with cattle and sheep to a small white house. Our shoes splashed in the mud as we quietly crept around the back, heading to a window at chest height. Wait here, Rosa whispered. I'll let you in once your grandma has fallen asleep. A few seconds later, a rough, scratchy voice began. From the sounds, it seemed Rosa had gotten lost because she came home too late. Battling the howling wind, I rubbed my arms until the window turned, and then my guide pulled me into a cramped bedroom with a simple wardrobe and a small bed. Black dirt crawled up the stone walls, and the only sign that a girl was sleeping there was a red-haired doll lying on a wicker chair in the corner. As soon as I finish my chores tomorrow, I'll take you back to the tree, Rosa said. You can borrow my old clothes so we don't have to hide. An old lady's snoring, louder than a chainsaw, echoed through the wall as she laid down some sheets and a mat since a girl barely fit in the bed, let alone two. After we cuddled up, I looked at Rosa and whispered, "Why do you know so much about these time travel things?" She leaned on her elbow, took a deep breath, and began her story. Rosa's grandma had a bad temper, and whenever housework needed to be done, she'd wrap that big black cane around her granddaughter's neck and bark out orders. On her 9th birthday, Rosa was in such a hurry to finish her chores and go play that she didn't double-check the bananas she bought from the grocery store, meaning she missed a bruise. When her grandma saw this, she stood there with the cane like a sword in hand. Before things got worse, Rosa ran out the door, down the entire alley, and didn't stop running until she reached Ravenswood Forest, where she aimlessly stomped in the mud until she came across a tree with a large hollow in its side. It seemed like a good place to hide and cry, so she crawled into the hollow. Immediately, the ground gave way, and she landed flat on her chest. She spat out leaves and looked around. Nearby, an older lady was having a picnic. "Hungry?" the lady asked, offering Rosa some chocolate bars. Although Rosa knew she shouldn't take anything from strangers, this woman had a warm, inviting demeanor. Besides, she really, really loved chocolate, which she rarely got. As they ate, the lady explained that Rosa had fallen into the future, and proved it by showing a high-tech device that, by description, sounded like a smartphone. After they finished eating, Rosa announced that she would never return home. The future always beats the past. Unfortunately, the mysterious lady explained that staying would be far, far too dangerous. As a compromise, the lady promised to leave more treats. Next time you're hungry, scared, or your grandma is full, come back here. I'll hide more chocolate for you. But Rosa, don't wander too far. If you get stuck in the future, it would be very, very bad. And so, Rosa routinely visited the same place. Sometimes there were snacks, sometimes not, and once on Christmas Day she greeted a red-haired doll. But no matter what, she never saw the old lady again. And I couldn't even thank her. Rosa concluded her story on a sad note. "Wait a minute," I responded excitedly. "My grandma left treats when we had our picnic. Did the lady say her name? Maria, I think?" "That's her," I said, a bit too enthusiastically. In the next room, the snoring briefly stopped. I whispered, "The lady who left the treats was my grandma. I could take you to her." This made Rosa's face light up. "Really?" That feeling of joy didn't last long, as now my mind traveled back to the year 2015. "What's wrong?" Rosa asked. I explained that Grandma's illness meant she couldn't take care of me anymore. "But we can still visit each other, right?" "I think so. And if she gets better, we can have picnics, the three of us?" "Okay, it's a deal," I raised my little finger. "Pinky promise," she grimaced. Apparently, people in 1955 didn't make promises with their pinky fingers. "Here, give me your finger." Our pinkies intertwined. "There, now it's a special promise." "Huh, a pinky promise." With that, we both said goodnight. After a restless night on the hard ground, Rosa gave me a snug blouse and a wool sweater so I could blend in. Only my sneakers didn't fit, but there were no spare shoes I could wear. After quietly sneaking out the window, I waited as Rosa's grandma shouted orders. Eventually, she trudged through the house, letting out a paw-like roar over her shoulder. "Grandma needs me to pick up sausages from the butcher. I'll bring you back right away." On the way, Rosa asked me questions about the future, mainly about how people lived and worked. She couldn't grasp the concept of the internet and refused to believe that two men would walk on the moon in less than 20 years. In the middle of town, from the other side of the street, a group of girls playing hopscotch called out a nasty insult to Rosa that didn't sound very friendly. At first, she ignored them, but their taunts grew louder and meaner until she finally shouted, "What do you want?" They challenged her to a game of hopscotch. I stepped forward and said, "I can do that." Grandma and I have been playing it all the time. Rosa told the girls that I was her cousin. They noticed my strange shoes, and whenever I used words or phrases that weren't common in 1955, they gave me odd looks. But in the end, it didn't matter as I beat them 3 times, each time throwing back an insult. To get to town faster, Rosa taught me sledding, where you ride on the back of a wagon. A milkman took us half a mile before he heard our stifled laughter and stopped. We ran away giggling as he shook his fist. It was the first time I had fun since Grandma fell ill. We played old games with other kids, got more treats from the friendly baker, waved at workers cycling by, and quickly lost track of time. In the afternoon, back at the house, I reached the end of the alley, where Rosa's grandma awaited me. And I waited even longer. "Sorry, Grandma kept me at home," Rosa said, finally reappearing. "I had to wait until she took a nap." "We better get going," she said, glancing at the sun now half hidden below the horizon. Dusk had already crept in when we reached Ravenswood Forest. "Okay," I said, jogging up the gravel path. "Here's what we'll do. I'll go home and talk things out with my aunt. Then I'll bring you a costume tomorrow afternoon and we'll go see Grandma." Rosa stopped and raised her little finger. "Pinky promise. Pinky promise." As we stood there, our fingers intertwined, a branch snapped nearby. Then a sour stench wafted towards us. Our heads turned toward the smell, where, 30 meters ahead and shrouded in shadow, a huge figure watched us from the darkness. "Good evening, girls," he said, wrapping a hand around an oil lamp. He lifted the lamp higher, illuminating an ugly mouth with jagged molars. The man staring at us wore a flat cap, the kind seen in black and white photos. As we both stood motionless, he said, "Are you lost? Don't worry, I'll make sure you get home safe and sound." A hand, wearing a fingerless glove, extended, the index finger beckoning us closer. Rosa and I slowly stepped back. For a few seconds, the branches trembled and shook as the wind whistled through the limbs. Then suddenly, Pat the shepherd charged forward. Rosa's hand clung tightly to mine. She pulled me towards a dense tree wall where we twisted sideways to slip through a narrow gap between the trunks. Pat stormed after us but got stuck halfway, seeming desperate for air. "Come back here," he growled, his voice laced with genuine malice. Rosa and I had to quickly navigate through a maze of sharp branches and thorny bushes. Every time we shook off our pursuer, he somehow found the trail again. Sweaty and exhausted, unable to run any further, we crawled behind a bush and helplessly listened as the footsteps grew louder and nearer. With one hand on my knee, still breathing heavily, Rosa pointed ahead. "The trees over there. I'll distract him so you can run away." "Rosa, no!" Too late. Without warning, she quickly hugged me and then ran off. About 20 meters away, she picked up a branch and snapped it in half. Then darkness swallowed my new friend. I couldn't even follow her. Dead leaves rustled as our pursuer changed direction. When only the howling wind remained, I ran in the direction Rosa had pointed, and quickly found myself back at our hiding spot. I spun around, hopelessly lost. Abandoned. Soon, Pat would find me, and then I would never see Grandma or Rosa again. No one would ever know what happened to the girl who ran away from the hospital, but then a flutter of wings close to my ear. My head turned around. In front of me, next to a fern, I thought I saw insect-like wings in the pale moonlight. They vanished with a shake of my head. Seeing no other option, I raced in the direction I had seen them, barely aware of the thorns piercing my neck and wrists, ducked under interlaced branches, and then found the fairy tree standing right before me. I had made it. These thick, twisting branches lifted and lowered like big exhales as I sprinted away. With one foot in the hollow, I hesitated. I couldn't abandon Rosa. If Pat caught her, the children of my time would tell stories about the ghost of a girl haunting Ravenswood Forest. Taking a long, deep breath, I shouted, "Hey, I'm here, you who?" until a bush at the edge of the clearing rustled around me. Then I jumped into the hollow. My left foot lifted as if taking 3 steps at once. As before, the world gave way. Instead of tipping forward, I crawled low this time, deftly slipping through the branches. A crushed mushroom lay directly in front of me. I had landed back in 2015. Now I just had to. Behind me, Pat stumbled out of the hole into the earth. Jaw clenched tightly, he looked up and growled, "Why, you little..." The scream that left my mouth was so loud that Rosa must have heard it in 1955. My legs carried me swiftly past the ivy curtain, working furiously at top speed. Despite my efforts to shake Pat, he stayed close behind me, his hands slapping around my neck every few seconds. Before a grove of trees, shimmering moonlight appeared before me, and just as my pursuer grabbed his hair, we both tumbled down a slope, crashing into jagged rocks along the way. As my foot bent at a strange angle, a sharp pain shot down my right thigh. The black water hit me like an ice bath. Bubbles erupted from my mouth as I turned in all directions, blindly searching for the surface. Suddenly, arms grabbed me around the waist. They lifted me out of the water and placed me on a flat, grassy area, still gagging on salty water and wet leaves. Before I could even take a breath, 2 hands with wet, fingerless gloves covered my neck. My skull felt like a balloon with too much air. Above me, Pat shouted that he was going to kill me, that he would murder me. It felt like I was looking up at him from the bottom of a well, and the well was sinking deeper and deeper. "Goodbye, Grandma. Goodbye, Rosa." But then voices. "Over here, this way." Beams of light pierced through the trees as dogs barked wildly. Several figures burst out of the forest, men and women with flashlights, police officers with tracking dogs on short leashes. It was a search party, my search party. The next officers aimed their guns at Pat, who threw both arms into the air. As the immense pressure around my neck eased, a brutal coughing fit took hold. Someone threw a blanket over my shoulders and then carried me to the entrance, a crowd gathering behind us as word spread that the missing girl had been found. Aunt Christine stood next to a police car, her eyes swollen and red. As we emerged from the forest, my forehead was met with a series of kisses. This nocturnal swimming had left me with a broken ankle, not to mention all the cuts and bruises. Paramedics rushed me to the hospital where doctors set my bones. Even under the influence of painkillers, I refused to sleep until the nurses let me see Grandma. I had to tell her everything about my adventure, that I had met the girl for whom she left chocolate bars. But since I disappeared, her condition had worsened. Now, even with the ventilator, every breath was a struggle. As they rolled me to her side, I leaned forward and asked if she could hear me. A pair of glassy eyes turned in my direction. Then Grandma weakly raised her right hand, her little finger curling, a pinky promise. At that moment, my eye fell on the medical chart above her bed, which read, Rosemary O'Sullivan, Rosa, Maria, Rosie Marie. Rosa, I whispered, and she gave the weakest nod. Together we wept, our pinkies intertwined, until her head fell against her shoulder. In the corner, a heart monitor beeped constantly. Yee. Nurses rushed in. One pushed me aside while another pressed on Grandma's chest, but nothing more could be done. Her time had come. A week later, the doctors discharged me, dismissing my story as a coping mechanism or a hallucination induced by swallowing lake water. The first thing I did was take the train back to Chicago Union Station to warn Rosa about the future, about what was to come. But when the train arrived, my heart sank. The forest was gone. In its place, bulldozers and rollers plowed huge mounds of earth through massive hills, pyramids of horizontally stacked logs piled up here and there. The tree was gone, and with it, my door back to 1955. I wake up groggily, my eyes barely open, only to realize I've been leaning against the window. As I lift my head, I notice a sweat stain my forehead left on the glass. I yawn and regret forgetting the pack of gum in the trunk. A few seconds pass before I fully register where I am. This long drive has completely worn me out. Inside the car were me, my mom, my dad, and my little sister, who had taken the seat right beside me. We were on our way to a secluded town in the Appalachian Mountains that my mom had heard about. Excitedly, she had convinced us to spend a weekend there. She loves all those spiritual, quirky things. Once a week, she forces us to do yoga. We've been to 3 silent retreats, where you stay quiet for an entire week. And once, we even had a seance. Yes, you read that right. My mom conducted a seance with me and my little sister Lily when she was just 7 years old. And since then, she's been traumatized by the experience, even talking about it. My dad, on the other hand, seems more normal, though he can be odd sometimes, but not as much as my mom. The city skyline I saw before drifting off had transformed into a natural landscape of green hills and dense pine forests as I woke up. The town, which I knew nothing about, was a 5-hour drive away. We were close, having left the interstate and taken a narrow country road leading deep into the Appalachians. The forest was dark and filled with towering trees. After 10 minutes, my dad suddenly said, "All right, looks like we're here." I looked up from my phone and saw that we had arrived at a large clearing, about 5 football fields wide, surrounded by trees in every direction. In the center stood a few small wooden houses next to some farm buildings. That had to be the town. "Man," I said, "what kind of place is this?" My mom turned to me with enthusiasm. "It looks picturesque, doesn't it?" "Where did you hear about this dump?" I asked skeptically. She laughed. "At one of my New Age gatherings, one of the girls mentioned this place. She heard people go here to cleanse their souls." I looked at her with a disgusted expression. I don't think my soul needs cleansing. I'm fine." "Yeah," Lily chimed in. "Why couldn't we stay at a hotel with a nice pool like everyone else?" "Oh, Lily, it's like a hotel, just a bit different." "Sure, if you call a rundown place that looks like a 19th century village a hotel," Lily said sarcastically, returning to her phone. As we approached the entrance of the town, we noticed there was no parking lot, and the road we had taken was blocked by a wooden gate. We pulled over to the side and parked on the grass. We got out of the car, stretched, and suddenly, my sister poked her head out of her phone and said, "Mom, there's no reception here." "Really?" I asked. "Oh dear, try to survive without your phones for once. We're in an authentic place. Right, Robert?" My mom turned to my dad. "Yes, of course," he replied sarcastically, adding, "It looks so authentic that there are no regular streets or parking lots. And where are all the other tourist cars?" I wondered the same. "Well, that means we don't have to deal with other annoying tourists, haha." My mom laughed. Sometimes she's so naive that I feel if she ever got stuck on a deserted island with dangerous animals and no food or water, she wouldn't suspect or fear it as long as it's authentic. We grabbed our luggage and approached the wooden gate blocking the road. "How can I help you?" We all turned around in surprise to see an elderly gray-haired man in white clothing standing behind the gate. My mom walked up to him with a smile. "Hello. We're the Johnsons. A friend recommended us to come here. We'd like to stay the weekend, please. You don't have a reservation?" I whispered to her. "I couldn't find their number or website," she whispered back, still smiling at the old man. He stared at us, assessing me and my family with his eyes before saying, "I'm the leader of the town. What brings you here?" "We came here because we heard this place helps with cleansing and soul purification," my mom replied innocently. The old man looked at her. "Do you believe in our method?" "Oh, of course. We firmly believe in this method," my mom said without hesitation. "We?" Lily asked nervously. My dad nudged her and told her to be quiet. The old man studied my mom and after a few seconds of doubt said, "Well, if you believe in this method, certainly. Come in. We'd be happy to accommodate you as long as you believe." He took a step back, opened the wooden gate, and led us inside. We walked for a few minutes through the outskirts of the town, traveling on a gravel road surrounded by old wooden houses on green meadows. Next to each house stood a few young women in white, chatting and giggling with each other. But as we passed by them, they immediately stopped laughing and looked at us with peaceful grins. It unnerved me a bit, though Lily didn't even notice. She was busy getting a signal on her phone. My dad walked beside me and my mom walked with the town leader. "Can you tell us a bit about this place?" she asked him kindly. "Well, as you probably already figured out, this town is a special place," the town leader said. "It's cut off from any urban infrastructure. There's no electricity, no running water, and no cell reception. Yeah, we noticed that, Lily said with a certain attitude. No electricity and power? My dad asked, surprised. No, the old man replied. We pump water from the well, and electricity is replaced by lanterns we light at night. Every evening at 6 p.m. we have dinner in the town center on the lawn. Right after, everyone returns to their huts and stays there until sunrise. Maybe we should just order pizza instead, I chuckled. There's no entrance for cars or people who aren't from the town, the old man responded. Well, we're not from this town, I said. My mom signaled me to stop the picky questions. Well, the town leader replied, pausing before turning to me, you're here because you believe in our method. We continued walking through the town and eventually reached the center, where a small hill with a well at the top stood. Around the well were more young women in white, laughing and giggling together. It seemed they were having a really good time, given how cheerful they were. We kept walking, and after a few minutes, the old man stopped beside an old wooden hut. This is your place. You have bedrooms, a bathroom, and a small kitchen with some basic ingredients. We'll meet again at 6 p.m. When do we have to pay you? My dad asked. The town leader turned to him and replied, Don't worry, we'll discuss the costs later. Then he quickly walked away. Thank you for everything, my mom called after him. We entered the hut, and my parents opened the luggage and bags, starting to unpack in their bedroom. Lily and I entered our shared room. The interior was wooden, with 2 beds, one on each side. In the middle stood a dresser with a vase holding a few yellow flowers. Above it was a window overlooking the town, and on the horizon, the well in the center of the town was visible. I wandered around the house when suddenly, Do you mean this seriously? We don't even have a damn TV, I heard Lily say from the living room. In every room I entered, I saw the same vase with a few yellow flowers. Mom? What's up with these flowers? I asked as I entered her room. My mom approached the vase, gently stroking one of the flowers. If I'm not mistaken, Clay, this flower is called marigold. Marigold? I asked. Yes, Clay. Marigold is the name of this flower. According to some Appalachian traditions, marigolds have the power to summon the spirits of the dead. In some regions, they're called death bells, bells of the dead. A strange feeling began to fill my body. Why do they have them in every room of our hut? I asked. Oh, Clay, don't underestimate others' beliefs, she replied. I'm not underestimating them, it's just knock, knock, knock. Before I could respond, 3 soft knocking sounds interrupted me at the front door. We all went to the living room where the door was. I saw 3 young women dressed in white, smiling and waiting outside our door. I opened the door, and they immediately turned their smiling faces toward me. Yes? How can we help you? Hello, welcome. We hope you feel comfortable here. We've brought your attire that you need to wear during your stay. The woman in the middle handed me 2 white suits and 2 white dresses. Thank you. My mom thanked them while I was frozen, staring at their eerie smiles. Don't forget that dinner is served for all townsfolk at 6 o'clock. Don't miss it. It will be delicious, the woman on the left said. And then the 3 giggled softly. We'll be there, my dad said with a polite smile. I closed the door as the 3 walked away calmly and suspiciously. By 5:30, we were all dressed in white. Lily was still trying to get used to her white dress. My dad actually felt comfortable in it instead of wearing a suit every day, and my mom was the happiest because it resembled the outfits she wore in her New Age workshops. We left the hut. The sun was already setting, and the sky was orange. We headed to the town center. As we got closer, we noticed the well in the center of town. surrounded by a circle of large tables and chairs. Everyone there was dressed in white, mostly women and a few men, all smiling and looking too happy in their white clothes. We approached them, and soon everyone was paying attention to us, smiling even more. I felt a bit confused and strange that everyone was looking at me. My mom awkwardly smiled back. We sat in a row before the long table encircling the well. Next to us, 3 people, a father, a mother, and their son, sat down. They seemed like fellow tourists. "Are you new here?" the father asked my mom. "Yes, we arrived today. Nice to meet you. We're the Johnsons. And you?" "We're the Mackenzie family. We arrived yesterday. Nice to see more tourists here," he replied. "How did you get here?" my dad asked. "We didn't see any other cars outside." The family father was surprised and said, "Really? Maybe you came through a different entrance or parked your car in a shady, cooler spot," he continued. "But the truth is we didn't see any vehicles when we arrived either." "Oh, so our 2 families are the only outsiders here?" my mom asked. "Well, there was also a lovely couple here yesterday, but for some reason I don't see them today. It's a shame because they missed the most delicious meals I've ever eaten." "Really?" I asked. "Yes," the father replied. "The food here is out of this world." But before he could finish his sentence, the strange ringing of a large bell interrupted our conversation. All the townsfolk sat down at the table. Opposite the well stood the town elder we had seen earlier. He stood in the middle, raising his hands to the sky. "Good evening. Tonight, as every night, we gather to enjoy the god's meal." Oh no, I hope this isn't one of those strange religious ceremonies, I thought to myself. Our community has invested a lot in the blessed cleansing work to provide us with this food. I raised an eyebrow, wondering what could be so pure about slaughtering a chicken or a cow, but I was too hungry to consider my conscience. "I'd like to congratulate the Johnson family," the old man pointed at us, "who have come tonight with the will to participate in the soul purification efforts." Everyone clapped and cheered for us, smiling. Of course. Then, he said, "Enjoy your dinner." Several women in white came over and began serving us the dishes. The meal was a large piece of meat along with rice. Everyone started eating, and so did we. As soon as I took a bite, it tasted strange. A flavor I had never experienced before. But then my taste buds transmitted the divine taste of this piece of meat to my mind. Oh, it was so delicious. I had never tasted such tasty meat in my life. It was 1,000 times better than any meat I'd ever eaten before. Even the rice was excellent, but I was too full from the meat. Even Mom and Dad loved it, and even my picky sister, despite her food choosiness, showed signs of satisfaction. After dinner, we stood up and returned to the hut. We were full and content. On the way back, we said goodbye to the Mackenzie family, who were heading to their hut. "I think I'm going to survive this weekend," I told my mom. "That's great, Clay. Glad to hear." My sister Lily was less enthusiastic, but at least she wasn't complaining about the lack of internet reception here. It seemed the place had cleansed her restless soul. When we returned to the hut, it was already night. We lit a lantern outside the door and entered the hut. We locked the door and got ready to go to sleep. The parents went to their shared bed, and Lily and I went to our beds. I lay down and tried to fall asleep. I wondered, why is it forbidden to leave the huts at night? What could possibly happen in a sleeping town full of secluded hippies in white who smile every day and know how to prepare excellent food? But as my thoughts raced through my head, I eventually fell asleep. A few hours later, I woke up, probably because I wasn't as tired from the drive here. It was still night. The wall clock showed 2 a.m. I went to the bathroom in our hut. When I returned to the room, I looked out the window. All the huts were dark and silent, but suddenly I heard a rather faint voice. I opened the window to hear better and realized the sound was coming from the center of the town, specifically the well. It sounded like people, really loud people. I had to check what it was. Lily was sleeping soundly in the bed beside me, and our parents were dreaming in their room. I went to the window and quietly slipped outside. I walked silently over the grass toward the well. The closer I got, the louder the sound became. When I reached the center of the town, I noticed that all the tables had disappeared, and the sound was coming from the well. "What the hell?" I whispered to myself. "What's happening at the well?" I approached quietly and then realized it. The voices coming from the well were screams, people screaming. I was shocked. I reached the edge of the well and peered inside. It was all dark. There was no water there. This well didn't seem to lead to a water channel. Why would the old man lie to us about the well? I thought to myself. But I was shocked and confused about what was going on. I took my phone out of my pocket to try and record a video. A second before I could start recording, the screams stopped, and the well went silent. But then, after a few seconds, I heard laughter, the laughter of younger women, loud laughter, sweet laughter, but nothing about it was sweet. I shoved my phone back into my pocket and turned around, quietly running back to the hut. Terrified as hell, I quietly slipped through the window into my sister's room and mine. As I tried to process what had happened, I tried not to wake anyone up. Dad would kill me if he found out what I did. He's one of those old-fashioned fathers. Mom would be disappointed in me. This is the perfect vacation for her, and she must already be dealing with the stress from me and Lily. I lay down in bed and covered myself. After a few heavy breaths to calm down, I fell asleep again. Somehow. The next morning, I got up as my mom nervously pulled the blanket off me. "Clay, what did you do? Why did you do that to them?" she said angrily. I tried to understand what she was referring to. What are you talking about?" Then I realized she knew I had left the hut last night, but then she said something else. "Why did you take the flowers out of the vase? All the vases in the house are suddenly empty." "What the hell?" I said. "Mom, I didn't do that." "Clay, the fact that you don't respect the place and its beliefs doesn't mean you have to act that way and steal them." "Mom, I didn't steal any of the flowers," I said. "Clay, don't lie to me. I'm so angry and disappointed in you," she said, bursting out of the room. I was exhausted from the terrible night I had, stood up, and saw Lily sitting and looking at me. "Clay, what did you do?" "Lily, you have to believe me," I told her, closing the door and locking it. I leaned over to her and whispered, "Lily, listen. I don't know what's going on with this place, but last night I was near the town's well and I heard screams." "What?" She was surprised. "You snuck out of the hut in the middle of the night? You know that's forbidden. That's not the point. Listen, Lily, something bad is happening here. I don't know what's going on, but I think we should get out of here." You have to understand that Lily, despite her moody and cheeky nature towards everyone, can empathize with others' suffering. She painfully went through middle school. "Clay," she said to me, "please tell me you're joking." "I wish I was," I told her. "Listen, we can't stay here the whole weekend. We need to get out somehow." "Good luck convincing Mom," she said to me. In the afternoon, I went to my mom. "Mom, listen, we can't stay here." My mom looked at me frustrated. "What's wrong, Clay? Don't tell me you've become just like your sister." I didn't want to tell her the true reason. I knew she wouldn't believe me and would think it was an excuse to leave. "Mom, please, you have to believe me. I don't like this place." "Clay, calm down," she said. "This place is great. We're isolated from the modern world, eating excellent food, and resting all day." I truly believe we're having a soul purification experience that we all need, especially you, after you stole the flowers. I didn't steal them, but 3 soft knocking sounds at the door interrupted our conversation. I went to the door, and there stood the same 3 girls outside the door. I opened it, and I noticed that, and this time, they had flowers tied to their ears, the same kind of flower that had disappeared from our vases, marigolds. "Good evening," they said with a gentle smile. "We just wanted to make sure you lovely guests come to dinner at 6 p.m. tonight." I stared at their flowers. "Why are these flowers on your ears?" I nervously asked my mom. "It's okay," the middle one said. "We're wearing the flowers because today is a special day." "What's so special about today?" I asked. She grinned and said to me, "Oh, you'll find out soon enough." My mom grabbed my hand and pulled me inside. She thanked the eerie women and closed the door. "Stop being rude, Clay," she said, walking away. At 6 p.m., we returned to the well center. I couldn't help but think about what I had heard there last night. Everyone was back, smiling and giggling as if everything in the town was normal. We approached and sat down again at a table set for dinner. This time, the Mackenzie family who had been here yesterday wasn't there, nor were the spouses the father had noticed who had arrived the day before. "Mom," I said, "where is the family that was here yesterday?" "I don't know. Maybe they wanted to stay in their hut and rest. It's weird," I told her. Instead, a new family appeared in the crowd. Next to us sat 5 people, 2 men, 2 daughters, and a son. I approached the son, who seemed about my age, and asked him, "Hey, is this your first day here?" "Yes. Our dads wanted us to vacation here. How long have you been here?" he asked. I told him we had arrived yesterday, and he raised an eyebrow, asking, "How did you get here?" When we parked, there were no other cars besides ours. What the hell? What the hell is happening at this place? I tried to tell my mom about our car, but suddenly, the gong bell rang again, and the old man stood at the bar, delivering the same speech. This time, he thanked the Smith family, the family sitting next to us, for choosing to participate in the soul purification efforts and blah blah blah. It was the same thing he had told us yesterday, only this time directed at the new family who had joined this crazy town. The food was served, meat and rice again. While everyone ate and enjoyed it, Lily and I didn't. We had no appetite for this food, this town, these people, and those damn screams. I wanted answers. I wanted to know what was happening in that well. I decided to stand up in the middle of dinner, and suddenly, everyone dressed in white stopped eating and talking and stared at me, staring without blinking, as if their smiles were replaced by confused and sad faces. They stared at me, and the old man approached and asked, "Why are you standing?" "I'm not hungry," I told him. "Eat, it will cleanse your soul." My mom reached out her hands to me, but I pushed her away. "No, thank you. I'm not interested." I stood up and walked away angrily, everyone at the table staring at me as I left. My parents were embarrassed, and Lily was ashamed. That evening, the parents and Lily returned to the hut, and I was in my room. "What the hell was that, Clay?" my mom asked me angrily. "Mom, enough. I can't take it anymore." I began to cry. "What happened to you, Clay?" she asked, her anger pausing for a moment as she saw her big boy break down in tears. "Mom, I went out of the hut last night because I heard screams from the well. When I was there, I heard people screaming. Screams, Mom, then laughter, women laughing. I don't know what it was. I don't know who stole the flowers, but it wasn't me, okay? Didn't you notice that the family from yesterday isn't here? Didn't you suspect that something damn strange is happening here? And please, I know you wanted me to be here for you, but this is not a good place. It's not a place to cleanse the mind and soul. I just want to go home. I cried, pressing my head into a pillow that lay near my knees. She took a deep breath, not nervously, but emotionally. "Clay, I don't know what's wrong with you. What you're telling me? The truth, Mom. I'm telling you the truth." She placed her warm hand on my head and slowly lifted me up. "I brought you here because I wanted us all to have a good time, to relax, to have a calm mind, and to be peaceful and pure. But you're my son, and the last thing I wanted was to see you suffer like this. And if you're feeling this bad here, we'll leave." "Gobu, what? Really?" "Yes. You're my son, Clay, and there's no better way for a spiritual and pure mind than to help my child," she said. "I'm telling Dad we're leaving tomorrow after breakfast. You and Lily start packing your things." "Thank you. Thank you, Mom. Really, thank you." I thanked her as my tears stopped. She left the room, and I began to pack my luggage. Lily entered the room, and after I told her the miracle that had just happened, she also began to pack. In the middle of the night, I woke up again, and my whole family was asleep. This time, I didn't wake up from a bad dream, but from a strange sound. I opened my eyes and got out of bed. Suddenly, I panicked as I looked out the window. I saw one of the young women standing outside my window, grinning with the same flower in her hair. I took a step back and ran to my parents' room to wake my dad. But as soon as I crossed the living room, I noticed another young woman right outside the window near the front door, the same as the first one, grinning with the same silly flower in her hair. I ran further and stormed into my parents' room, only to see a third woman doing the same thing right above my parents' bed. I screamed in fear, and my parents woke up in panic. They looked behind them to see the source of my terror, and noticed the eerie woman. "Mom, Dad, we have to get out of here, now!" I shouted. Lily woke up to my scream and ran to me as she noticed the girl. The four of us ran to the living room, but as we tried to open the door and get out, we heard a soft knocking at the window. There they were, the three eerie women who had come earlier today. They stood with gentle grins, behaving as if everything was normal. They grabbed our hands and tied them, forcefully pulling us outside. There were too many, at least 30 of them. They smiled and led us to the town center to the well. When we arrived, I noticed that all the townsfolk were awake, all dressed in white, surrounding the well, holding hands. The women brought us to the center of the circle around the well. The townsfolk sang a song in a strange language and prayed. Suddenly, everything went silent, and we were surrounded, trapped, all holding hands in a large circle that enveloped us and the well. They smiled. The town elder approached us, holding a flower in his hand, and this time he was smiling too. "It's time," he said. "Dear Johnsons, it's time to finally cleanse your souls." "What does it mean to cleanse? What the hell is happening here?" I screamed. "As you said, you're here because you believe in our method." "What the hell method?" my mom asked helplessly. The old townsperson approached my mom and placed his hand on her belly. "I understand you enjoyed your meal tonight," he said. "Well, the Mackenzies were certainly a delicious meal." Oh, no. Then it dawned on us. The meat, that delicious meat we had eaten, was human flesh. The flesh of previous tourists who had come here. I couldn't believe it was happening, that I tasted. "Oh my God, I want to puke my entire stomach," the old man continued. "And tomorrow, all our townsfolk and the new guests, the Smiths, will get a taste of the God's meal, which is purified from your flesh, in just a few moments." Lily broke into tears and agony. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My mom was helpless and about to faint. But my dad was angry, too angry to give up. He looked at me and nodded, a signal that it was now or never. In a split second, we both stood up and stepped around the girls surrounding us. I bit through the ribbon they had tied around my dad's hands. He did the same. and we were both free. The other women tried to reach us and attack, but my dad pushed them away. I freed my mom and Lily and helped him. Suddenly, even Lily stood up and helped us, and my mom, despite all her peaceful and spiritual agendas, helped us as well. We all fought for our survival. The townsfolk gathered around us in a circle to form a human wall. I immediately went to the old man and shoved him to the ground. I grabbed him by the throat, strangled him, and locked my elbows so he couldn't let go or strike back. Instantly, everyone in the circle was alarmed. A few women tried to rescue him from me, but I yelled, "One more step and I'll break this old man's neck." The old man could barely breathe. "Move! Step back!" my dad shouted with a stone in his hand, one he had found near the well. The townsfolk slowly stepped back but were still alarmed and let us go out of fear of their old man. My dad ordered the old man to show us where they keep the car, and the old man, his face turning blue, pointed the way. My dad, Lily, my mom, and I began to run as the old man became our hostage. The people behind us tried to chase us. "Stay there," I shouted. The old man gestured with his hands for them to stay. After a few minutes, we reached a rusty warehouse, and the old man pointed to the door as we entered. Upon entering, we were shocked by the sight. Dozens of cars, family SUVs, probably from previous tourists who had been eaten here. "What the hell?" I said to myself. "How many of them did you slaughter and eat?" I yelled at the old man, pulling my hands even tighter around his neck. We found our car. My dad opened the trunk and told me to put the old man inside. I threw him in and closed the trunk. We quickly got into the car, and my dad started the engine. He pressed the gas pedal, and the car sped through the warehouse walls. In the rearview mirror, we saw a bunch of women in white, at least 50 of them, chasing the car and yelling, "No, no, bring our dad back, please." But they weren't fast enough. My dad drove full speed to the main entrance and broke through it. We left the town and drove into the forest. We sped through the forest, and after about 10 minutes our car began to slow down. No more fuel, they must have drained the tank mostly. The car gradually lost speed, and finally came to a complete stop. Luckily, or not, it was enough for us to reach a lonely motel. It seemed empty enough for us to slip the old man inside without anyone noticing. While my dad and mom discussed with the receptionist about getting an affordable room, Lily and I held the old man with our hands, pretending he was our old grandfather who couldn't walk alone. We went to the ground floor room, overlooking the dark forest. My dad knocked the old man unconscious and placed him in the bathroom, locking the door. While they thought about how to explain the whole situation to the police, I sat down to write down this crazy story. It's 2 a.m., and I was distracted by that same sound I heard on the first night. The same eerie sound, that creepy laughter again. I stuck my head out of the screen and I can see them, the women in white, standing outside our window, leaning their heads against the glass and beginning to whisper, "Please, open. We're hungry. Yes, we're hungry. Please open, let us in." I have to end the story here because the window is slowly starting to crack, as well as the front door.